You finally rebelled against the voice in your head, the judge you never chose. The Stoics watched men do this. You stopped obeying it. You did the opposite of all it demanded on purpose, and it felt like air. So why months later does it still feel like that voice is the one running your life? The Stoics watched men try to win their freedom this way, and watched it fail, again and again, for a reason almost no one sees while they are in it. Because there is a difference between leaving a man's house and merely moving into the room across the hall, where you spend all day listening through the wall. 17 centuries ago, Lucius had come to a hard recognition. He had heard the cruel voice in his head for what it was, not his own, but his father's, installed and still passing sentence, long after the man was dead. And recognizing it, he did the thing that feels like the only thing to do. He decided to fight it. He woke one morning and before his eyes were even open, caught himself doing what he did every morning, running the day's plan past a judge who was not in the room. What he would wear, how hard he would work, whether he was permitted to rest. And for the first time, he saw the whole architecture of his life at once. Every room of it built to a dead man's blueprint. And he understood that he had chosen almost none of it. So he wanted out. Not peace. Not yet. That is too quiet a want for a man who has just discovered his cage. He wanted freedom. And freedom looked like defiance. If the voice had built this life, he would tear it down and build the opposite. That was the plan. It is always the plan. The father had prized restraint, so Lucius indulged. The father had kept a spotless ledger, so Lucius let his slide, almost with pleasure. The father had demanded a straight back and a measured word, so Lucius slouched, and spoke loosely, and let the careful man he had been go soft at the edges. Each small defiance felt like a lock springing open. For a season, the mutiny was intoxicating. He mistook the thrill of breaking a rule for the peace of not having one. But the thrill is not freedom. The thrill is the rule, felt from the other side. And slowly, this is the part the rebel never expects, Lucius began to notice something that cooled the whole rebellion. Every single act of defiance was still being measured against the same voice. He was not choosing the wine because he wanted the wine. He was choosing it because his father had forbidden it. He was not resting because he was tired. He was resting to spite a man in a grave. The verdict had flipped, but the judge had not changed. The father was still the author of every line. Lucius had only crossed the words out instead of writing them. To rebel against a standard, you have to keep that standard in front of you at every moment. You have to consult it constantly, not to obey, but to make sure you are doing the opposite. And so the rebel and the obedient son turn out to be the same man, facing the same direction, organized entirely around the same person. One says yes to everything the voice wants. One says no to everything the voice wants. Neither of them ever gets to simply ask what he himself wants, because the voice is still the only thing in the room either of them is talking to. Lucius had a memory that should have warned him. His father had a younger brother, an uncle Lucius barely knew, spoken of in the house only in lowered tones. The brother had rebelled too, completely. He had fled the family, refused the name, drank, wandered, and died young in a far city, having spent every year of his life proving he was nothing like his father. And the cruel joke of it, which Lucius only now understood, was this: a man who spends his whole life proving he is not his father has made his father the measure of his entire life. The uncle had not escaped. He had become his father's photographic negative. The same shape, every value reversed, still drawn entirely from the original. He died as defined by that hard old man as if he had stayed and obeyed him to the letter. The chain does not break just because you pull against it. Pulling against it is how you stay attached. This is what the Stoics saw so clearly. Epictetus, who had been a slave and so understood exactly where the lines of ownership fall, taught that some things are within our power and some are not. Within our power are our judgments, our considered choices, the assent we give or withhold. Not within our power is almost everything else, including, he would say, the reflex. And defiance is a reflex. It is a reaction handed to you by the very thing you are reacting against. When you let another person, even a dead one, decide your no by deciding your yes, you have given the one thing that was ever actually yours, the judgment underneath the reaction. Rebellion is not the opposite of obedience. Rebellion is obedience at the top of its voice. The obedient man hands over his behavior. The rebel hands over his behavior too. He just adds his anger to the package. Both have surrendered the only territory Epictetus said was sovereign. The quiet inner act of deciding for yourself on the merits, what is actually true and good here, in this today. So, the question that finally stopped Lucius cold was not how do I fight the voice harder. He had been fighting it with everything he had, and the fighting was the leash. The question was stranger and much quieter. What would it even mean to stop answering it at all? To ask it neither for permission nor for something to push against? Here is the recognition, and it asks more of a man than any rebellion. Rejection is still obedience. As long as you define yourself against the voice still sets the terms. It simply gets to be the thing you are not, which means it is still the thing deciding who you are. Freedom was never doing the opposite. Doing the opposite is a map drawn entirely by your jailer. Freedom is no longer consulting him, not for a yes, not for a no. It is the strange, unpracticed work of turning to the matter itself and asking what you, the living man standing here, actually judge to be right. Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire and still found the hardest country to rule was the one inside his own skull, wrote that men are forever seeking retreats, houses in the hills along the coast, when there is always available to them a retreat into their own soul. He did not mean a hiding place. He meant a room where the question is not what would he say, nor how do I defy what he would say, but only, what is the right thing, and am I, right now, being it? That room exists in you. The voice cannot follow you into it because the moment you are genuinely asking what is true, you are no longer arguing with anyone. But the cost was real, and Lucius felt it before he felt any freedom. The mutiny had given him an identity. The free man, the rebel, the son who got out. It had given him a target for an anger that had nowhere else to go. And most of all, it had let him be right, gloriously and permanently right, against the man who had made him feel wrong his whole life. To set the mutiny down was to give all of that up. No more enemy to brace against. No more ready-made self. Only the bare, quiet, frightening task of figuring out, with no one to obey and no one to defy, what he himself actually thought. For a while that felt less like liberty than like standing in an empty room. What changed in Lucius was not a victory. There is no victory here. That was the whole illusion. The voice still spoke. His father's standards still arrived, uninvited, with their old certainty. But Lucius slowly stopped taking the bait in either direction, stopped rushing to obey it, and stopped rushing to defy it, which he finally understood was the same hook with a different worm. So one evening he went to do the defiant thing, the small, reckless thing he had done almost daily to prove that he was free. And he stood there and felt for the old thrill, and found that it had quietly gone. He did not do it. Not because the voice forbade it. Not to prove anything to anyone, living or dead. Only because he today simply did not want to. A small plain choice that belonged to no one but him. The first one in years that the voice had not authored on either side. He did not announce it. There was no one to announce it to. He just stood in the new quiet for a moment, and noticed the strange, roomy silence where the argument used to be.